So let's talk about something that's at the heart of, well, pretty much every economy. What's the real deal with money, business, and a country's growth? You hear it all the time, right? To get the economy going, just pump more cash into private businesses. But is it really that simple?
I mean, it's a super common assumption, isn't it? The thinking goes, if banks just lend more money, businesses will expand, and the whole economy gets stronger. It feels logical, for sure. But today, we're going to put that very idea under the microscope. And we're going to use one country's economy as our real-world laboratory.
All right, so let's get specific. We're zooming in on Nepal. Now get this, in 2023, the amount of money loaned out to its private businesses hit an incredible 74% of its entire GDP. Just let that sink in for a second. That means 3/4 of the country's entire economic value is tied up in private credit. That's huge.
And that right there brings us to the central puzzle. With a number like 74%, you would absolutely expect to see some kind of crazy sustained economic boom, right? But has that actually happened? Is all that credit, working the way we think it should? So to get some real answers, we've got to look at the data. And we're diving into a really deep academic study by Manoj Kumar Sunuwar. He looked at over 30 years of Nepal's economic data, all the way from 1990 to 2023, to get to the bottom of this exact question. And believe me, what he found, it might just flip your whole perspective on how economic growth actually works. Okay, so before we jump into the big conclusions, we need to get to know the main characters of the story. These are the key economic bits and pieces that Sunuwar was tracking for those 3 decades. Let's meet the players. All right, let's do a quick rundown of the terms so we're all on the same page. First, you've got GDP. That's basically the country's total economic report card. Then there's PSC, private sector credit. That's the loans we're really focused on today. Next is GFCF. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. It just means the big investments, things like factories, roads, new machines. Then you have FDI, which is foreign direct investment, money coming in from other countries. And finally, HDI, the Human Development Index, which is all about a country's health and education levels. Got it? These are the puzzle pieces we're working with.
Okay, you ready for the first big reveal from this study? Because it's a good one. It turns out the impact of all that credit, it's not consistent. It changes over time. Think of it like planting a garden. You put the seeds in, but you don't get a tomato the next day, right?
And check this out. What the study found was that in the short term, we're talking like the next year or two, pumping more credit into businesses has a pretty insignificant effect on growth. It barely even registers. But, and this is the key, over the long term, that same credit has a really significant positive impact. Totally different story. So the big takeaway here is pretty clear. Credit is not a magic wand. It's not a quick fix. It takes a lot of time for those loans to actually turn into new buildings, new jobs, and, real growth you can actually measure. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay, now we're getting to the really deep part of this whole thing, the chicken and the egg problem, the big question of cause and effect. What really comes first? Does pumping in credit cause the economy to grow, or does an already growing economy create the demand for more credit in the first place?
I mean, this is the fundamental question, right? Are the loans pushing the economy, or is the economy pulling the loans? The answer has massive implications for how governments should try to manage things. So, what did the data actually say? Well, the study's answer is surprisingly clear. Using this fancy statistical method called a Granger causality test, it found something called unidirectional causality from GDP to PSC. Whoa, okay, what does that mean in plain English? It means the cause and effect relationship is a one-way street. It only flows in a single direction. And this is how that one-way street works. First, the economy grows. Then, because the economy is growing, businesses see new opportunities. People feel more optimistic, and that's when they start asking for more loans. So the increase in credit, it's a result of growth. It's not the thing that kicks it all off. So, okay, great. What does all this academic stuff actually mean for the real world? How should a country like Nepal take these findings and use them to build a better, stronger economy? Let's talk policy. Really, the biggest lesson here is that credit isn't some magic switch for growth. You can't just make money cheap and easy and expect growth to pop up out of nowhere. A better way to think about it is credit is like high-performance fuel. It's super powerful, but it's useless if you don't have an engine to put it in. And in this case, the engine is the actual, real economy. So what the study points to is a smarter way forward. Yeah, you still want to make sure people can get credit, but you have to be smart about it. The real job is to build that engine. And how do you do that? You make smart investments in things like roads and power grids. That's our GFCF. You invest in people through better schools and hospitals. That's the HDI. And maybe most importantly, you create a stable, predictable environment where people and businesses actually want to invest for the long haul.
But why does this all matter so much? I mean, not just for Nepal, but for any country trying to grow. Why is this distinction between cause and effect so important? Well, because it really forces us to think hard about what creates real, lasting economic value.
Because at the end of the day, real economic strength, it's not built on easy money. It's not built on debt. It's built on a solid foundation of productive companies, educated people, and reliable infrastructure. Credit is an amazing tool that helps you build the house faster and better, but it's not the foundation. And that's a lesson that applies just about everywhere.